I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Randle is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Andrew Kuo, congratulations on the closing of your magnificent art show this week.
Thanks, man. It's, the streets say I don't take days off, but I'm taking a day off, man. It's incredible. First time ever in history I've taken a day off to celebrate the closing of a stupid painting show.
It was not stupid. It was great.
Thanks, man.
Down at Broadway Gallery in, is that technically Tribeca?
Tribeca, the new art hotspot in Manhattan. Galleries have been flocking down to Tribeca because it was cheap, it got expensive, everyone left, and it got cheap again. So the nature's healing, as they say.
We saw some great Cookies allies over there.
Huge.
Jacoby from Jalen Jacoby, Pablo Torre, Kat Marnell. I mean, you know the other ones, but yeah.
It was awesome. You yourself showed up to the opening and closing in true 90s rap fashion. It was cool, man. It was a show that I had made kind of throughout quarantine and COVID. So there's a lot of writing in my paintings. So a lot of the writing was kind of based off of stuff I'd like jotted down in my rhyme folder throughout quarantine. And it kind of came out in a weird way. It was more disjointed and everything. I may like poetry, man. Is that weird?
No, I like that you're sifting through your rhyme book and you're like, rappers on monkey flipping with a funky venom. Oh, no, sorry. That's my lyrics from Illmatic. This one is the one for the painting. It's about eating over the sink.
I'm not an art business, man. I'm an art business. No!
Oh.
No, but there's a lot of, it was called the Water Lilies, and it was kind of about Monet in his last few years creating a Japanese pastoral Japanese scene in his backyard and going out every day in plein air and painting it over and over and over. And these are some of the most famous paintings in his life, and I felt like it kind of lined up with the way our city was disappearing, kind of, and trying to capture it desperately, but instead of painting actual like lily pads and flowers, it's just like big blocks of color and drippy whatnots.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
It was great.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, I saw when you were talking about it on Twitter, you described it as kind of the fucked up world you saw during COVID, and then translating it. Yeah,
man. It's shout out to my friends. Broadway is a new gallery. At the worst possible moment to open a gallery in New York City, my homies did it. They decided just to get one of those newfangled, discounted storefronts and take a chance on the rest of their lives, which is pretty awesome, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because there was so much discussion about New York being dead, and you see like the New York Nico is like, who said New York is dead?
Not the interns. Yeah.
Not the interns. It's this odd sort of like thumbing their nose at the like voiceless critics who said that New York was never going to come back. It feels pretty normal. Like the struggling New York City. Like, yeah, there are places that closed. A lot of people lost their lives. It was grim and traumatic. But things are kind of sprouting back relatively quickly right now. Like even those discussions of like, they said New York was dead almost sound like cliches from, like Bodega Face.
Yeah. Well, I feel like everybody wants a simple story to something really complicated. And my simple story to the complicated thing that happened to us last year, all of us around the world, is like individual people have a great amount of influence and power. And whether it be Emmanuel Quickly coming down from basketball heaven to bless MSG, the mecca of hoops, or like a buddy of mine just deciding that fuck this, he's going to start a new gallery. It takes people like that, and I'm very drawn to people like that in life in general.
Wise words. Wise words.
Yeah, wasn't it weird to be at an art opening?
Yeah, I mean, I felt as if all the art openings that I've gone to over the last year, which are not a huge amount, they're very reserved in a way that ones in the past were not, for very obvious reasons.
For sure, man.
You know, thinking about one of your first shows when you were with Marlboro Contemporary up on the spot on, I want to say, like 24th Street.
25th? Yeah.
And 25th Street. Yeah. I remember going there and like crushing beers and hanging out, and there was just, like, tons of people there. It was like a full on and beer scene.
Everyone just having one adult beverage, and only the adults. If you were legally able to consume N beer, you were having that N beer.
Yeah, and thinking about that change towards now, but hopefully those things will all come back, and we'll be able to have N beer as a larger collective in the near future.
Yeah, back in the day, like, were you around for the Deitch Project's block parties and the Tokion ones? And like, it would just be crazy, right? It would just be like, oh, the entire block is jam packed, and Yellow Man is trying to make his way through the crowd to do 3 songs on a sculpture. It was just like, oh, here's the truck full of Red Stripe beers, and maybe Theophilus London rapping. Who knows? You know, anything can happen. Is that Travis Scott? Probably, because he's at everything. But this was kind of even before that zone.
That was earlier.
Yeah, man. It was. Remember Fisher Spooner, that art collective? It was kind of that era, the Electroclash era that we talked about last week.
That's like 2002, maybe?
Easily 2099 to 2007, maybe. Deitch Projects, but that was huge. And I know Jeffrey Deitch gets some stress about what he did in LA and his populist point of view, but I will always love that dude. I love populists. I like people who give us what we want, play the hits, right? Jeffrey Deitch like created a scene for us in New York City, I think.
His parties were great. And do you remember the Spring Street Festival?
Yeah,
the Spring Street Fair, or whatever the last word of that was, where they would just shut down Spring Street from like Bowery a full block over, and you could just like drink and smoke weed in the street, and it's kind of amazing. And then they got really blown out during the World Cup because people brought like huge TVs in, like corporate sponsors kind of came in and put up these huge TVs, and then if you wanted to drink, you had to be behind this like, you know, yellow police line type of thing where you were ID'd to go in there, and then the TVs cut out at a climactic point in the like World Cup finals.
Oh no!
And that was the last one. It just ruined the whole thing.
The scourge of vuvuzelas.
Because prior to that, it would be like, you know, Harold Hunter and all these people we knew, just kind of like rest in peace, just sitting around smoking and drinking and like leaning up against the buildings. It was very casual, but it was mob. I really do miss those kind of things. And I did feel like last summer, due to the fact that the city was so vacated, you did have a few moments that felt a little like that. Like there were few and far between, like a rooftop party here and there, or going by the river at night. And there were a few moments that had that sort of lawless energy that has not been around in a while.
Yeah, man. If you were lucky enough to have like I survived the blackout, or you know, the Hurricane Sandy was deadly, but if you were lucky to have not suffered any catastrophic injury through that, it was kind of like the chaos of it was kind of incredible, right? Like having no power, just finding your homies. Someone always had beer. You know, if you partook in a weed, you could maybe find a weed, you know.
And toke.
Yeah. You know, and whippet, you know, you could probably find that too. But there's the chaos of New York City is kind of like, in those moments, if we're lucky to escape death, it's kind of incredible. And remember last week there was like a rave outside? what they call a rave. You heard it on the recording. I went out there that night and someone had put up signs being like, sign this legislation and call this representative to get the outdoor music coming from cars off our streets. And I was like, yo, are we just all cops at this point? Like, can you just go out and talk to the dude? Maybe they did. You know, maybe the person who stuck that sign up was like, hey, I have like a sleeping kid. Can you, I'm recording. Maybe hypothetically, if that person was recording the Perfect Basketball pod and was shaking his fist out of his window, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what New York City we expect to live in, but I'm looking forward to what this summer has to bring.
Yeah, thinking of the sort of upsides to these traumatic incidences is a kind of nice way of looking at it, and saying that without minimizing, you know, the downside. Naturally, the only one that doesn't have that is 9/11. There was no like sweet side of 9/11.
That sucked. I felt that way about COVID, to be honest. The month that we podded, the perfect pod, each more perfect than the last, straight for like a couple months, I did not feel any joy. It was just despair. I didn't find any like redeeming New York moment. You know, the pots and pans banging, I felt to be really sad. I didn't really partake in that.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, I didn't like any of it. I didn't like any of the signaling on my social media feeds. It just nothing worked except like waiting in desperation.
I thought it really turned the corner in the summer, because that's when you had the numbers just plunged. And even though there was no vaccine yet, the numbers plunged because everyone was outside and people started mingling, but New York was empty. You had the protests. I thought the summer was really unique and memorable, and there were a lot of great moments despite the presence of COVID. But yeah, 9/11, trying to think back. No. No. It wasn't like, yeah, the bars stayed open. No. I didn't go to work for a few days. Just sat around hoping that like anthrax wouldn't get delivered to your mailbox.
Yeah, we didn't know if it was over or not. And there was like tanks and armed guards being like, do you live on the street? Because we can't let you through. And you'd have to show them an ID or like a piece of mail. It was just like insane, man.
Yeah,
like,
but not say it was bittersweet. It was just bitter.
Yeah, it was just. There was a deli near my studio, a Chinatown deli. I believe it was on Broome and Center, and they had just given everything away. And I remember talking to the woman, being like, "Is the government gonna give you this money back?" And she was like, "I don't know what's happening. Like all my stuff is gone." And no one has talked to me about anything, but what do you need? Just take it.
And then you'd hear stories about, you know, Sikh cab drivers getting like assaulted out in Queens. And you're just like, so everything is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. No upside. Everything else though. Hurricanes, blackouts, even COVID, some good sides, but 9/11. I guess we did get to invade Afghanistan. That was sick.
I mean, when I think about how much we hated DT, your boy DT, I think about how much we hated W, and like it was the same feeling. We were just like very frustrated with our leadership. But isn't it weird how, and not to get, this is hopefully going to end up in a positive spin, but there's more people, we lost more people from COVID than 9/11 by far. But it felt like we were trying to like glean some stories from it in the way we weren't doing from 9/11. Is it because we learned from 9/11, or the fact that we were all kind of susceptible to the dangers of COVID where we weren't in 9/11?
I think it was because of American exceptionalism, and when we were attacked on 9/11, it was this like we were targeted because we were America, and that this was on American soil, and which is totally unfamiliar for people who have lived in the United States. Other places around the world, this shit happens all the time, but for us, like on American soil, what?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was so traumatic. And then, of course, it was utilized for other political purposes, getting some good oil, nice crude. But with COVID, we knew this had happened elsewhere. We knew this was coming. It had happened in China. It had happened in Italy. It was happening in France. And then it was coming here. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we were able to sort of channel our American exceptionalism other than to say we don't respect it.
Yeah, totally. And I also think so much of it is optics, and the Twin Towers like going down in real time as we were watching it was like a far different experience than like the slow, intense burn of COVID, right?
Yeah, when someone wastes away from cancer over the course of a year, you recognize the suffering.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as someone getting hit by a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of those, there's like an image like, holy shit, this person got hit by a car.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like movies, right? Like if someone instantly disappears from the story, you're like, that's crazy. That's called Game of Thrones, And then when they reappear, you're like, what the fuck is this? This is not storytelling.
Otherwise, you're watching Leaving Las Vegas, and it's just Nicolas Cage drinking himself slowly to death. You're like, okay, my attention span can only take so much of you drinking and beer.
Mm-hmm. How it's going to take him 2 hours to drink and beer, dude.
Which will kill him.
What a dream actor's job. It's like, hey, Nick, do you want to play an alcoholic who slowly drinks himself to death in Las Vegas? He's like, yeah.
I'll do it.
I think I can handle this as an actor. Respect to Nicolas Cage.
For sure. So the subways are about to be open 24 hours a day. If it hasn't happened already, like by today, it's happening in the next few days, I believe.
Yeah.
They were running until like 1 or 2 o'clock, and then they were running until 4, and now they're just going to go back to the duration. Also, I believe it's this Wednesday, outdoor dining and drinking is going to be curfew-less. What that means exactly, I don't know, because most places don't serve food or drinks outdoors after midnight anyway. So again, unclear what that really entails. End of the month, there's going to be basically no curfew. Everything's going to be wide open. So I guess what I was getting back around to was, now that people are staying out later, we're running into issues where like, oh shit, how am I getting it home? Which is not something that most people have thought about for a while. And I was in the city out pretty late the other day.
Nice. Having on beer, right?
I had end beer. And I looked and I was like, okay, well, I don't know if I feel like taking the subway right now. And there's no yellow cabs around. What does a Lyft cost? Because I don't have Uber on my phone. And I looked at Lyft, and it was $70 to get from the East Village back to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
That's a 12-minute ride with no traffic. It's $70.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like, it's just wild, right? Like, I always think about this. Like, what if I told you can buy something that's the size of a cigarette box that has the entire world on it, plus all your social media apps, every song ever in history, and like can take pictures and make phone calls? You'd be like, well, what is this thing, $20,000? It's like, no, it's $2,000. It's an iPhone, right?
And there's an app that if you open it up, there's a box and you text a message into it and you hit send and you can ruin your life immediately.
Yeah, with one word. All you have to do is drop one word.
You'll just have this in your pocket at all times. The ability to just immediately ruin your life.
So like, yo, man, I think about that sometimes with cabs, even before Uber and Lyft. I'm like, oh, this is an expensive cab ride. And then I'm like, should I buy a car and move it and fill it up with gas and get it fixed and pay tickets? No, I'll pay $40 for this car across town. But like, yeah, I mean, Uber and Lyft prices have skyrocketed, right? Because the demand is low, I'm guessing, lower, and they're trying to make up for lost income or lost market.
I don't know what the the rationale for it being clearly double what the cost would have been elsewhere. It could be that there's just not that many people working, and that it's just operating off supply and demand. It could be what you said, that they're just raising the prices. It could be that there aren't many yellow cabs working. So without yellow cabs as competition, the ride shares can kind of just go against each other and keep jacking the price up. You know, like instead of undercutting each other, they're both sort of like the high tide raising all ships with the prices if yellows are just not out there. But I don't know. There are definitely a few more yellow cabs than there were over the summer, but they're still not anywhere near the population that they've been in the past.
What time of day? Was it late or was it like really late? Because I want to know, like, one time I asked a cab driver how come I can never get a cab when it rains. I was like, is it because you guys have so many customers? He's like, no, because we make all of our money in 20 minutes and we all go home. I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. He's like, yeah, we all have families that we're like dying to spend time with. So we make the money so fast that we just call it quits. I'm like, that makes sense.
I mean, it was late when I was getting it, but I've also heard this from people who at like 11 o'clock on a Friday said it would cost $60 to get into the city from Brooklyn. So like it just seems to be pretty consistent in terms of like high prices across the board.
I always think peak pricing is so interesting because you pay a penalty for something you can or cannot control, right? Like sometimes you can't control when you get out of work because everyone gets out of work at 6, and a lot of these, for example, the Metro North up to Westchester and Long Island and Connecticut have more expensive rides, but they come more frequently, they're faster, and their explanation is like, in order to get everyone home, we have to expend more energy to get there. Therefore, our salary cap has to be higher. You need to buy the superstars,
But it's got to be something with at night and the population of cars and people's reluctance to take the train at those hours too. Has to be. Because right now, a lift from where I am in Brooklyn to Lucien, for example, is like $22, which is pretty normal.
Oh,
so
that's great.
So it has to be a late night thing that's happening.
For sure. Yeah, maybe there's no Uber drivers out there. Man, I know people even who live in New York City, but people who don't live outside of New York City, I took the J train a lot during COVID. It was very scary. And like, what are the greatest hits? One time I walked in a car and I noticed quickly people were kind of aghast, and some dude was like taking a shit in the middle of the car screaming about our president. Another time, like, someone had a small knife and was like swinging it. We quickly moved to another car. I sat next to some guy who like inexplicably started burning his clothes as he was wearing them. Like, it didn't feel safe. So like I hope New York City knows what it's doing. And I think this is definitely mental illness and despair. So I want to know what they did during COVID to help people with despair or mental illness. And I think it's a really difficult thing to do, but this wasn't fear of crime. This was fear of chaos, a different kind of chaos.
Yeah, there's a difference between what you see in Los Angeles and Skid Row from the idea of like a tough neighborhood. That's mental illness.
A lot of it is, yeah, for sure. Schizophrenia. Man,
I mean, it could be all types of things, but it's self-medicating, etc. But yeah, when I was out there in LA a few years back, and I was staying kind of in Skid Row. Yeah, it was in Skid Row. And, you drive in and had a gate that opened and you went in there into this apartment building. It was an Airbnb because I was working in the neighborhood. And then one day I was like, well, I'm just going to walk up to like whatever Broadway or whatever, whatever the streets are there in downtown LA. And people have been like, you shouldn't walk around. I'm like, come on, man. Like, live in New York forever. Different neighborhoods. Like, come on, be serious. I made it 2 blocks before a guy started basically following me with a knife.
Yeah, dude.
He's like scraping it on the ground, cursing at me, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna like visibly walk faster, but I'm gonna walk faster. And I was just listening to see if his pace like.
Yep.
And he just kind of got sick of yelling at me, but I was like, come on, 2 blocks? I didn't even make it like there and back. Like 2 blocks, someone was like threatening my life. Can't say I liked it.
Yeah. And like, I don't think that's rampant in New York at all. But when But when you walk into a train car and some dude is like, if you don't take off that mask, I'm going to cut you with this small, harmless looking knife. I'm like, well, this isn't what I'm used to. Like, I'm not sitting listening to a perfect pod, minding my own business. I'm like very aware of my surroundings and trying to problem solve more than I'm used to on the train.
And of course, with mental illness, you know, it's just people, you know, ranting and acting crazy 99% of the time. I'm not being flippant about it, but like they generally aren't going to assault you. But like, it's still not cool. It's still not a great feeling. But you know, you also have like sympathy for these people. Like they've been left to their own devices. You know, the other day I was walking down the street and some guy's like, "Hey, can you borrow $1?" And I was like, "Sorry, man." And I hear him like, "Fuck off." And I walk off. I'm like, I almost want to like turn around. Like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Like, no, but you don't. You don't because you compartmentalize. But like, I'm not tough. I wasn't trying to like fight him. But I'm like, I just said, "Sorry, man, I don't." And you're like, "Fuck off." Like, I gave you a totally reasonable response. As like, I looked at you. I acknowledged your question, and you're cursing at me, like, dude. Come on.
This is the mental gymnastics I think many non-white people have to do in America. And I think I've talked about it to you before, with you before. I'm just like, I have to let it go because you don't know me at all. So you're telling me to whatever, go back to my country, fuck off, like this or that. And I'm like, you don't know that like I love the Knicks as much as you do. You don't know that like I have my pizza rankings just like you do. Or maybe you don't know that like I am as freaked out as you are, you know? So I just like have to let it go. But I feel like in New York City, a really bad place to be is on the verge of tears or like screaming. Like, and I think many people are always on that verge. It's like if one random thing happens, you just like burst into tears. And, you know, not even a COVID thing. I just think it's just like a place with this much spice could really get under your skin in a way that is, it kind of builds up. So I always try to keep myself like on the verge of laughing with somebody, not at somebody, with somebody.
I always try to keep myself on the verge of tears.
I know
like
many
all
people.
Times.
I know many people like a cab driver like blows them off and they'll start crying. I'm like, what happened? It's just like, I don't know. I cannot explain why I'm doing this. I'm like, yeah, this place is hard, man.
I'm a grenade, and my hand is on the pin, and that pin lets the waterworks go. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Yeah. But you don't know anyone like that? Like, have you heard or seen anybody kind of like emote in that way from something that like seemed pretty normal?
I mean, I'm sure.
Maybe I hang out with more not in a good or bad way. Maybe I hang out with sensey folk.
I mean, I've definitely seen people cry over small things. That's for sure.
And it's never about that thing, right? It's about everything that came before someone like stealing, upswimming you from your cab. I'm like, all they did was upswim you. They didn't see you, and they're like, "Why is everything so shitty?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is a different conversation."
Right. It's like someone drops like a cupcake and bursts into tears. Like, what's this really about?
Oh, dude, it's insane. Or
like, I just love cupcakes. Oh.
Or someone being like,
I guess it's about the cupcake.
Jason Tatum grew 2 inches this summer. I'd be like, what is this really about? Tell me. Say it. Say it with your chest.
He took a leap, and then he took another leap, and then he's growing into a superstar in front of our eyes. What is this really about, BMM?
It's not that he might be a top 3 player. It's that he might be a top 3 player on the Knicks.
Many people are calling him a poor man's Kevin Knox.
Oh, no disrespect to Kevin Knox. I mean,
we
are
gotta-
you gonna
sorry.
are you gonna take the subways? What's up? Are you gonna feel safe at 4 a.m.? Are you gonna take that G train, that L ride?
Yeah, of course. But I've taken it when I'm close to the L. It's just when it's late at night and you're not that close to the L, or especially living in Greenpoint, because getting to the L means that then you just have to take a transfer or you have to walk for 15, 20 minutes, and
Ah, it sucks.
you don't always feel like doing that.
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't not take the subway out of a fear of danger. It's a fear of like falling asleep and ending up in Canarsie.
Yeah. I mean, since we only have N beer these days or forever, how do you feel about City Bike?
City Bike seems cool. I know people have been using the e-bikes and really enjoying them.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like really whipping it over the bridge.
The bridge is tough, man. There's an incline on the bridge that is no joke.
Well,
It's
I used to ride regular bikes over the bridge a lot. I haven't in a few years. I used to do that like constantly. When I'd go out in the city, like go to like APT and just like
Yeah.
ride from Brooklyn
Yeah.
over the bridge, go to APT, ride back home. But
Well, you had
I
those
haven't
good
tried
gears, right?
That was kids, youthful energy. But I haven't used the e-bikes. People say that they're great though.
I'm into them, except when they creep up on you on the sidewalk and you almost get hit because you can't hear them at all. It's like zoom, just right by you.
People shouldn't be riding on the sidewalk. I'm sorry.
I know, but I can understand why they do, because sometimes they want to park like next to a door that they have to make a delivery at, and I'm just like standing next to that door by
Yeah,
accident.
that's acceptable. That's just a cost of doing business.
Yeah, charge it to the game. Charge it to the e-bike game.
Yeah, I mean, people just cruising down the sidewalk, that's wild. Also, joggers going down
Oh.
the sidewalk is weird to me too. But
You're still hating on joggers. I'm into this idea. Do you think there should be a jogging lane?
no, I think they should operate in the bike lane, or I don't know.
The
It's
bikers
just-
will get mad. Who's more ornery, joggers or bikers? Bikers are pretty ornery, but joggers, I don't know.
I feel like bikers, when they were really about that life, wearing like, hats with like the brim turned up, and like the old school generation of.
Post Messenger, though, right?
I'm talking about that era. I think people who biked a lot were like either like cyclists or delivery guys or real enthusiasts, true believers. Now that they're so normalized, I don't view bikers as particularly a hostile breed overall. Like,
Well,
sure, those guys are still there. Those women are still there. They're still in the mix. But it's a big tent of bicycle users, especially with City Bike in New York now.
Yeah. Well, the bikers melted down their fixies for their parts and broke down all their custom bikes and took it to Twitter. It's like the same person, I think, that is like a Twitter cop was like a fixie cop, which is fine, whenever.
That's the era I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
The era of the fixie. Like, that's weird. They just vanished, huh?
Yeah, is it? I mean, I quite like the e-bike thing. I don't ride bikes in New York City because it's dangerous, but I'd like to. I love riding a bike. I just hate riding a bike in New York City. There's a lot of cars, man. A lot of angry people walking too.
I think it's gotten a lot better
Yeah.
than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, new city planner, right? Who made more bike lanes and made more
Yeah.
medians.
There's just so many more bike lanes and medians. I remember riding my bike out to Fort Tilden one time.
Ah, that's fun.
This is probably like 2003 or something like that.
Yeah.
And this was kind of before it had become, a summer destination for North Brooklyn and downtown as a little sort of nude beach getaway. And going out there on like a Friday afternoon, no one there. Maybe like a Russian fisherman and one other person, like as far as the eye could see. It was really crazy to have that place accessible. But I remember driving down Flatbush, and it was the most harrowing bike ride of my life. There were no lanes. It was just potholes, pedestrians. Dollar vans would come in front of you and cut you off, and then you'd go in forward, and then they'd race by you, around you, then cut you off again. Any psychological restfulness that I had, accumulated out at the beach was fully gone by the time I was home. Just a white knuckle ride for like 40 minutes straight.
Wait,
I never did that again.
did you say new beach or nude beach?
Oh, it's like a nude beach out there.
Did
I mean,
you,
now
wait,
it's not.
nude
Now it's
with a
not
D, right?
nude. Yeah.
So
Like a
did
young-
you let your
like young
junk hang
nudie.
out? Did you ride to go have your junk hang out?
I just rode nude the whole way out, and then put on clothes when I got to the beach.
So you had to ride standing up the whole time because there's probably a great deal of chafage, right?
You better believe it.
Huh.
Explains a lot of the honking.
I didn't know there was nude with a D beaches in New York City, but that would make sense that people would love to go to Fort Tilden. I didn't know that was allowed in America.
The thing about Fort Tilden is that it's government property, federal property. I believe it's not state property. So there's no lifeguards, there's no restrooms, there's no.
Oh,
there's
interesting.
There's no nothing. So that's why it became so popular, because people could go out there and you'd bring drinks and it was empty, and it's kind of only accessible on foot. So it doesn't have crowds of families who pull up in a car. You kind of have to make the effort to get there. And again, same deal. Like, there's no bathrooms. If you're a family, that sucks. There's no water. There's no anything. But if you bring your own stuff and you're with your friends, it used to be completely abandoned. Now it's like fairly popular. I mean, if you went out there today on a nice, spring afternoon,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there. I've seen photos on Instagram already of people who are at Tilden.
How do you bring bathroom relief? I mean, number one, for sure, but number two, relief. What would that constitute? Has someone made like a Shark Tank solution for this?
Well, out there's these sort of bluffs of sand with
Holy.
some tall grasses. I guess that would be your only option, unless you went in the water, which is not a great option either.
How do you pull that trigger in the water? I don't know. Would you get poo shy? I mean, Paul Pierce could do it. He's clutch.
Paul Pierce can poo at the drop of a dime. Like, he can poo on command.
He can drop a dime and then poo.
Drop a dime and a deuce immediately.
Yeah. Did you know that Jason Tatum's kid Deuce was named after Paul Pierce? Oh, that's mean. That's a kid. I can't do it. I can't do it.
That's a bridge too far.
It's too far, man. I take it back. Shout out to, I love Allen Houston, man. I like these players. Come on.
Have you caught up with our pod's new obsession? Walking bucket, Mayor Sheehan.
All right.
Of Pound Town.
Spoiler alerts. If you haven't watched the last episode of East Town and Down, turn off now. We'll come back to some other tantalizing topic in a minute. But hells yeah, I'm caught up on this show. This show's amazing, dude.
Episodes 4 and 5 have been bangers.
Fire. It's
So
like, I like this guy. Dead. I like this thing. Jokes.
So episode 4 was pretty comedic. You had the scene with Mayor's daughter and her new girlfriend and her old girlfriend, and them fleeing the basement, and the grandmother getting knocked over and sent to the hospital. Like, there was
She's a great
legitimately
actress.
legitimately funny shit happens in episode 4. Episode 5, they went Silence of the Lambs on us.
Well, hold on. The funniest scene maybe the funniest scene I've seen this year was in episode 5 when the mayor was having a date with her partner, and he tells a boring story about a Food Network show. And he's like, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And then she goes into the investigation. He's like, "No, I wanted a bite of your tortellini."
Oh yeah,
like-
that was good. I forgot that one.
that was before something happened to him.
Right. A bite of the tortellini.
You just don't miss a chance to eat a tortellini and survive the night. A week, whatever.
I mean, at least he got a dying man's smooching.
Oh yeah, he did steal a nice little kiss, and you knew he was, spoiler alert, done for when she was like, "Oh, I kind of like him." I'm like, he's a goner, man.
That's it. That's a dead man walking.
Yeah.
She finally opens up just a little bit. You see that crack of sunshine, that little glow of a woman smooched. He's not going to make it out the ep.
because highly inappropriate in 2021 standards. But I don't know if this is a period piece because it's very progressive in other ways. Like there's a lot of LGBTQ righteousness. There's like the kids are very like Euphoria and.
I mean, it's definitely contemporary. They're using like iPhones and shit.
Yeah, they name drop Boy Racer, which is kind of an awesome band. All three better as solo artists. But anyway, Boy Genius, I'm sorry. Boy Racer was an old European gaze band, shoegaze band. But I think the relationship between Mare, your girl, and her partner was weirdly old-fashioned, right? It's like Humphrey Bogart stuff.
Oh, his wooing of her?
Yeah, it felt kind of odd as a contemporary thing to have on Prestige HBO.
Well, I would agree. I was kind of surprised that he was interested in her to begin with.
Why?
Only because in the context of the show, for him to be her partner, who was like booted off, and he's like, now can I ask you out? And it's like, are you assuming she's never coming back? Because then that would be a little strange.
Yeah.
But regardless, so here's where we're at as far as this murder investigation. So we had the teen prostitute who was kidnapped, played by Sasha, who is a Kalina Strada model. Shout out to her. And she ends up in this little chamber with the girl who was kidnapped a year prior, correct?
Yep. Some Silence of the Lambs stuff.
So they are both now freed. The cops showed up. That suspect is now killed. The partner is now dead. Oh, these are all the spoilers. We still don't have any idea who has killed our original murder victim.
It was a detour.
Right. So we've solved sort of the kidnapping, and realized that this is not part of a serial killer's path.
Right.
That was a separate case. So now our suspects are coming back towards townspeople.
Mm-hmm. And you knew
is the author still in play, or is he out of the loop now? Who do you got?
the busy author. Well, on the deleted scenes, if you stuck around and watch the extras on HBO, there's a scene where he says, "I ate her liver with a nice glass of Chianti and some fava beans." So he has to be the one, man. Yeah, I don't know. The busy friend did not make an appearance in episode 5. Is that misdirection? Probably, but we did take an aside. There were some scenes where the kids start burning diaries. All right, can we talk about diary culture? Who the fuck keeps a diary, man? Just throw it up on Twitter with some jokes and some shaking my damn head acronyms, right?
Well, I'm not to gender diaries, but I've never known of a guy who kept a diligent diary, and I've certainly known women who have.
Well,
so when you say diary culture, I'm just not sure if we're saying, like, does that still exist, or is it just for women? I don't know.
Is Twitter not your diary? Because I kind of know what you're doing based off of Twitter. Like, a diary doesn't have to be like, "Dear diary, I had a beer a taco again for the 14th straight day." It could be like, "Yo, Matisse Thybulle needs more time on the court," right?
I suppose. But I guess what I'm saying is, I've always viewed diary culture as the jurisdiction of, like, teenaged women, teenaged girls. That's always, to me, like diary day ones. Are they used as a dramatic device in film to the extent where I believe that every teen girl has a diary? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, I want to say it only exists in movies, but as a high school kid, I used to publish a zine of my writing that I kind of did every day. So
are you a diary day one?
Of course. I mean, I just kind of put up an art show that was kind of like a diary, right? I love that kind of exposition, right? I like I don't know, I call it like self-reporting, where it's like an objective kind of representation of what's going on in your brain. I love that stuff. I love Twitter. It's like, I don't want to hear about somebody's like waiting in line for the, I don't know, for the beer taco. I'm like, well, I kind of do. It's kind of interesting.
This is engrossing. Did you get the tacos? How were they?
Well, it's only as, take me on a ride to this beer taco is what I'm saying. Put me on this journey. Get me on that ship.
Not much happened, but it was well told.
Yeah. Sort of like a lot of marginal basketball players that we'll go into. Like, what happened in Kwame Brown's career? I don't know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Whoa, he's got something to say about it. I had no idea.
So Kwame. Kwame Brown, infamous bust, was taken first overall in the same draft that included, I want to say, Pau Gasol.
Yeah, Euros were not yet accepted as.
I think he went
top
third.
Talents. Yeah,
but that was a draft. I want to say that was the 2002 NBA draft.
2001.
2001, is that right?
Yeah, you want me to go down quickly? Kwame Brown.
Who are the top five?
Brown, Tyson, Gasol, Curry, Richardson, Battier, Griffith, Diop, White, Joe Johnson, Kendrick Brown.
Wait, did you say Battier, right?
Yep, Battier was 6 to the Grizz.
Yeah, I was at that draft. It's the only one I've ever been to.
Oh, was it MSG, obviously?
MSG Theater.
Well, I remember this one being one of the most memorable ones because the Bulls got their twin towers of those high school kids. It was really exciting.
And I remember some kid came in and was like, I just asked Eddie Curry for my autograph, and he said no. And since then, I'm like, this Curry guy sucks. Like my one nugget of information on Eddie Curry, I'm like, this dude's a dick.
That goes
Don't
out
like
to,
him. I'll hate him for life because some kid said he wouldn't give me an autograph.
That's a lesson to be learned. Always sign autographs that people ask you for. Everyone out there, always sign the autograph. You never know what kid's heart you'll break. And adult's heart you'll break through the kid like yourself.
Yeah, that draft was very low on collegiate talent. From what I remember correctly, Shane Battier was pretty much the only kind of older player to get drafted out of like the top 10 or whatever.
Jason Richardson, Michigan State, he had a good run. He was a sophomore. He went 5th. But this draft ends up being kind of one of the all-time great drafts. Zach Randolph later in round 1, Gerald Wallace, Tony Parker, Gilbert Arenas in round 2. Your boy, Mehmet Okur, like, that's not bad, right?
I would not say all-time great, but not bad. But it's
I love Arenas.
Obviously, the way that these things work, it's always going to be emblematic of a time because it's literally chronological that they were drafted the same year and they entered the same year. But there is something about this group that like just reeks of like the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really watch Troy Murphy, the OG doofus, and not go right back to like the original NBA 2K, right?
Exactly. I'm just like Jason Richardson. I'm just like these guys are really emblematic of a period. And of course, this is 100% natural and it will always be that way. But just those names, that little, sachet down memory lane. I'm like, yep, Zebo, J. Rich. Yep, I remember that era well. Monte was out there doing his thing.
Jerry Stackhouse was somewhere. I think there's 4 Hall of Famers in this draft. I think it's Tyson Chandler, Joe Johnson, Tony Parker, and Gilbert Arenas will probably not make it. But to me, he's a Hall of Famer.
I'll give you maybe 1 of 4.
Tony Parker? He gets in just because of rings, right? The big three get in.
You could be right, but I'd have to check and see what he did internationally because Manu's international history was pretty impeccable too. I'm not sure that Tony Parker did that with France.
But Manu didn't have a cipher skills that Tony Parker had. TP.
No, he never did two songs with Fabulous.
Yeah, so that gets you into the hall, right?
And he also got involved at that brawl at Greenhouse that involved, I think, Chris Brown, Drake maybe, Meek Mill.
Wow.
Tony Parker got glass in his eye.
I remember this. Tony Parker did a lot with nothing, man. He's an inspiration to me because he was in the mix at a lot of these places for being kind of like a nerdy guy who is a very good basketball player, but like not necessarily modern. Pretty bad rapper in terms of NBA lore, and like not that fun to be around from all reports, right?
He was squiring Eva Longoria around.
Well, I only say not fun to be around because your girl Evan Longoria had nothing good to say about him after the divorce, as divorced people do. But what did Kwame Brown have to say about Gilbert Arenas, though?
So I don't know what the Arenas part was. I saw Arenas putting up an Instagram post about how Kwame Brown, who was this infamous bust, was...
Yeah, he was kind of good.
He played 13 years in the NBA. He could defend, he could rebound, he could block a shot or two. Was not a skilled offensive player in an era where there was still an expectation that big guys would post up and have have baby hooks and all that a la Abdel Nabi shit.
Yeah.
But
ooh, I'm looking at his advanced numbers. Tough player, but he, as you said, played a lot of years in the league.
I mean, he was kind of just a big body. He could play a little defense. But again, 13 years in the NBA. That he is a bust, but it's hard to say, this guy was a horrible basketball player. You just can't stick around in the league that long if you're terrible. Okay. It's very difficult to do because we've seen guys like, Hashim Thabit or Anthony Bennett. Like they get a couple chances and then they're out.
They get a lot of chances and then they're out.
And then they're out. And both of them probably logged under 1,500 pro minutes or something. Yeah. Kwame played quite a bit. But anyway, so my understanding of this rift is that Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, two excellent former players, have their own podcast. It may be perfect sometimes. I'm not sure if it's perfect all the time. But it's called All the Smoke. And they've had everyone from Allen Iverson on the show to Allen Iverson for sure. They've definitely had Allen Iverson. But they made some comments, I guess, about Kwame Brown and used him as a punchline. An example of a guy who was not good at basketball, a guy who was a bust or whatever. And I know he had also been kind of shit on by Phil Jackson in the past, and Kobe Bryant had made a joke one time about, like, who do you want me to pass to, Kwame Brown? And Kwame does not seem like someone who has appreciated these barbs about his basketball career. So he took to Instagram and, shooting monologues with him firing back, curse-laden monologues. And he's from Georgia. And he was talking about, hey, I grew up homeless. You have jokes about basketball, but I have jokes about your life. I was in the NBA. Like, I'm not a loser. And, you're talking as if you're not one of these fraternity of players. You're speaking as if you're an outsider. And, like, you should know better. But he went in. And he was talking about, Derek Fisher stealing Matt Barnes' lady. Talked about Matt Barnes wanting to be a thug.
All true things.
Stuff about Matt Barnes having a confused racial identity. I mean, he really went in on all this stuff. And apparently Kwame he might be a punchline, but he is not to be fucked with.
Yeah, I mean, in the era of social media, I'm grateful we get this post-career Kwame Brown. Back to the idea of like him being accused of being a bust. I know, it is the cookies ethos. Mm-hmm. If you make it to the NBA, you have done something tremendous, right? And if you're if you're a lottery pick, let alone a first overall pick, you have succeeded in a way that no human being, 14 people every year experience this. That's not many. But, we love the game so much that it seems like 14 is a lot every year. Without hyperbole at all, who would be considered a bust in NBA terms? Can we, knowing that we feel a certain way about like calling people names this way who get to this level, could you consider who would be on your bust list?
I think you would have to put Anthony Davis excuse me, I'm sorry, Anthony Bennett on the list, and Hashim Thabit. Those are two that come to mind. Like guys who just can't stick in the NBA, to me, are the ones who go down as busts. I don't think Greg Oden was a bust. That was unfortunate. He had terrible injury issues. Like I can't.
He was really good for a season.
It's really good. You know, you look at his per 36 minutes, he was putting up something like, 16 points, 14 boards, and 4 blocks or something. Like he was going to be a dominant center, but his knees were fucked. But you can't say Kwame Brown was one, or even like Michael Olakandi. Like he played in the league for a while. I just don't think it counts if you were a legitimate NBA player for a decade.
All respect to Robert Swift and all care in talking about Robert Swift, but things didn't quite work out for him and he seems troubled, right? Is he a bust?
Yes.
Right? At some point we have to just be did you lose the game? Yes, you lost the game. But in life you didn't lose, but you did not win the championship, No.
Michael Olakandi,
he played for a long time too, right?
Yeah, he was taken in the 1998 draft, number 1 overall by the Clippers. He was an infamous bust. Infamous. He played 9 years.
Yeah.
He played 13,000 NBA minutes. That's not insignificant. He played pretty heavy minutes for 7 years of his career.
Yeah. And I think we're getting at where Kwame's coming from, right? It's just to be called a bust is a level of disrespect that, okay, Matt Barnes talks shit. Gilbert Arenas is famous for being a smack talker. But do they really want that Kwame smoke? Because now you've awoken Kwame Brown. And he seems very comfortable defending himself, as he should. I think this is just pretty harmless banter. Someone might get some hands eventually if they saw each other in real life. But this is awesome drama, right?
Well, our buddy Pablo Torre said this is Karl Malone energy. And he has that.
Yep.
He has that country voice.
Yeah.
It's certainly a lot more street than Karl Malone would be.
Yeah.
But, he's a much younger guy. He did venture into some stuff about pulling up your pants.
Oh, did he?
There was a little bit of respectability politics sprinkled in there in the mix.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, fair enough. They're fighting right now. So, the gloves are off.
Yeah. I mean, he was I think you want some of the smoke.
Matt Barnes, I enjoy watching Matt Barnes on TV. He seems like a really nice guy, but he has a reputation for being a hard-ass tough guy. And I'm kind of with Kwame on this, being okay, how hard and how tough? Show me, because I'm pretty hard and tough too. I kind of enjoy this banter. I don't know, as long as no one gets hurt. Don't pull a Critterton gun on anybody. But if this is just going back and forth between two heated adults, it's sort of like what Anthony Edwards said about Cat, right? It's it's just two adults going at it, man. It's fun. Sit back and enjoy this.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I'm not really sure how Arenas got roped into this because he was clearly the best basketball player out of this.
I really loved him.
Entire group, this quartet. But I would also say this though. I think one thing that's cool about Kwame's point of view that you're just talking about basketball is that we're not in the locker room.
Yeah. Yep.
That's over.
Yeah.
None of us play basketball right now. And it kind of reminds me of something that Greg Popovich said before when he was talking about his locker room. And he's like, my rule is you can't treat Tim Duncan different than the 12th man on the roster. Because then you're treating them differently as people because of how they play on the basketball court. And I thought that was a cool approach.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means I don't think if Tim Duncan says, hey, I want this, maybe you give a concession to him that you don't give to a rookie. It wasn't necessarily about that. It was about showing respect for them as men, as human beings. It was don't treat people differently because of how they play. And I kind of think about that sometimes, even playing pickup ball or stuff. You're oh, am I being nicer to this guy because he got buckets? and like ignoring
totally.
the guy who like, you know, who went like 0 of 7
Yeah.
and like not being like as cool with them. I'm like, that's lame
Yeah.
because that's not real life. On the court, yeah, you pass the ball to the good guy.
Yeah.
But like once you're getting off, like, are you trying to have like more? You trying to have an beer more with the guy who's like really good at basketball and ignoring the guy who's terrible? Like that's, you shouldn't be doing that.
I told you this. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and beers are for everybody.
Yeah, I told you the story once. I went to a loft party to see this band Carp, who I love.
McKibben.
I wish it was Fort Thunder in Providence. Also, McKibben Loft kind of was influenced by Fort Thunder, in my opinion. But it was like a squat of like communist punk rockers, and they used to have punk shows there. And this band Carp with a K from Olympia was scheduled to play there. Loved their albums, their EPs, just like kind of like gnarly, heavy rock, fast screaming, all that stuff. And so the band was about to play, and we were playing ping pong, and some meathead dude was like, "Can I get a game?" I'm like, "You dare challenge a Chinese guy?" A cocky, like art school 19-year-old Chinese guy at ping pong. And I was like, putting spins on shit. And like, he was being so sweet, chasing after the ball, being like, "So good, you got to teach me how to do that. That was awesome." And he was like, "Oh, I gotta go." And he put down his paddle and picked up a guitar, and he was like the singer. And I was like, oh, I worship this guy. I am such a fool. And he was such a better person than me. You know, it's just like, I'm the asshole, and in life he wins, you know. And he's passed away, shockingly, but that band is kind of tragic. But I think, like, I always think about that, and this kind of conflict this Kwame Brown drama reminds me of kind of people behaving badly and like just waiting for like the relief valve for someone to be like, "Well, don't you realize how silly you have become?" And be like, "Oh, right. None of this really matters because we all played basketball at the highest fucking level."
Yeah, I liked his part about the fraternity as well. That like, hey, we're supposed to have a greater understanding and a respect for the other guys who made it this far. You know, these 300 guys who were in the league at the same time because of the best on the planet, that you shouldn't be talking as if you're a normie. Because we're supposed to know better. Whether or not that's true or not, I respect that idea. And I think you also do see that concept has played a role kind of in the dynamics in front offices at times too, or even the criticism from guys like Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley towards, say, like Daryl Morey. It's like, you're not in the club. You're not one of us. You didn't earn it here in the way that we find most acceptable. You know, you talk about it while we live it.
Yeah.
And I think that dynamic has played out in the front offices at points. And, you know, I was talking to someone who worked in a metrics department, and we were talking about David Griffin, who was the general manager of the Pelicans. And he was like, it took Griffin a long time because he was not in the club. He was not a former player. He was a metrics guy. He was more of like he was a suit.
Yeah. It's a nerd. Yeah.
Yeah.
You brought up a dude, and we were talking about always being on the verge of tears. But like this Hall of Fame weekend was kind of a nice one. Did you catch the Chris Webber Jalen Rose exchange? Talking about formerly or beefing ex-players. Did you see that little moment they had on ESPN or ABC?
I loved it. Loved it. Those were two of my favorite players growing up. Two of my favorite athletes. I loved that Michigan team, the Fab Five.
Yep.
Was absolutely devastated when they lost to Duke. The one and done bus factory. Was crushed when they lost to North Carolina.
Yep.
Yeah, seeing those guys being cordial but also appreciative of what the other guy had meant to them in their life at a moment when Jalen Rose has, you know, carved out another role being on television. Chris Webber, who actually is not coming back to TV.
Yeah.
His contract did not get renewed.
Yep.
But seeing him being, you know, awarded by going into the NBA Hall of Fame for, you know, being one of the greatest players of all time, and them just kind of respecting and ruminating on where they came from, I thought was like really emotionally powerful and really sweet.
And they weren't talking for years. And there was a documentary, I believe it was HBO. It wasn't a 30 for 30, I don't think, about the Fab Five. And Jalen Rose maybe helped produce it, and Weber didn't have any input because those two weren't talking. And it was part of that media cycle. It's just like, you know, like, I didn't talk to Chris about this. We're not good. I wish Chris was in the building. And like, and then slowly but surely, like, yo, success is winning culture, right? And like, when you are bestowed an honor, like being entered or voted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, it's like to me, like, good things happen when you're nice. And Weber had a nice thing happen to him, and then maybe he was just like, you know what? It ain't worth fighting with my boy Jalen about anything anymore. That's ancient history, because me and him, like you said, are good. Like, we are successful, beyond successful adults in this world. And like, what did we fight about? We were angry about like who said this about a tough situation. They lost 2 championships in college, right? And they lived their lives separately, and I felt like it was awesome to see, because I like it when people make up. It's cool. But it was also sad to see because they lost so much time, and they were both kind of like running parallel with each other in the NBA media. And I'm like, oh, we like you guys so much. It's good to see now, 30 years in the making, but we lost so much time for probably nothing.
Yeah, I felt bad that Chris Webber didn't have his contract renewed, but he was not a good play-by-play guy or a good color announcer.
I know.
He just was not good on air. I thought he was better when he was in the studio, because I really do like him as a person. I think
He's
I like his
interesting.
personality.
Yeah.
He has like a sensitive side and an intelligent side that make him unique for a guy who had the kind of success that he had. And there's a little, 9/11 may have just been bitter, but Chris Webber is bittersweet.
Yeah, for sure. And like, he had the George Foreman arc, right? He was a villain in Washington. Remember, he made that like slitting throat gesture, and everyone's like, he's everything that's wrong with the NBA, coming off the Fab Five like style stuff, amazing style stuff with the black socks and the long shorts. And he was like public enemy with Allen Iverson. And then he goes to Sacramento in quote unquote exile and thrives and becomes like a different dude, but still kind of salty. I remember when he got mad at the media for asking him about Tyra Banks, who he was rumored to be with at the time, or maybe actually just dating. And he like had a tenuous relationship with the people around him. And I felt like it was such an unfair place for him to be, because of the disappointment and pressures put upon him at Michigan. And I think he carried that deep into his adulthood. And to see him call games, I thought, you're right. He wasn't the best color guy, but to just have Chris Webber on my TV was cool. So I hope he comes back in some way.
Yeah, I'd like him to find another role. He's very different from Paul Pierce, because you had mentioned this, I don't know, a couple months ago, when Paul Pierce did not have his contract renewed, or after, or he was just suspended, or whatever. However they separated from ESPN after he had an evening of
Adult
strippers and booze and
adult
weed.
stuff. Yes, totally, just adults acting like adults, having and beer, hiring people to perform,
like Cirque du Soleil.
Yep.
But Chris Webber seems like a very serious guy. I know he has a collection of like African American artifacts, letters from Martin Luther King. In Paul Pierce, on the other hand, when I see him on Instagram, he's kind of acting like a child.
I mean, which is the best part of Paul Pierce. I love that part of it.
It's all good. He can do whatever he wants. I'm saying,
I love that.
Chris Webber losing this job does not seem like it's going to send him spiraling into a bad place. Every time I see Paul Pierce, he looks high as shit.
Well, remember how Paul Pierce got stabbed 11 times and walked himself to the emergency room. So he has a toughness to him that I'll never quite get there with. But I agree. And I mean, yo, Weber's rapping was very serious. All Eyes on Me, Humility Records, like those were very serious raps, man.
Humility Records. Oh yeah, that's my favorite label.
Yeah. Like it was intense. The album cover was him, like I think on Fort Tilden Beach with no clothes on, like contemplating his troubles. You know, like he's a serious dude. But I loved him calling games on TNT because he was not that serious, right? He'd joke around like
He was not great when it came to calling games. He was not great.
it is a skill that is as hard as playing basketball, I think. But yeah, his wordplay wasn't memorable. But also, we give these guys too hard of a time. I watch like the Lakers broadcasts. These guys aren't any good. I watch a Denver broadcast. Get out of here, man. Weber's fine. And no one's Clyde Frazier, man.
I'm trying to be charitable. Chris Webber was not cut out for doing live, like color and analysis. Just was not great at it. This does not mean that he doesn't understand the game, that he wasn't a brilliant, borderline maybe basketball genius
For
when
sure.
he was on the court. Like he
Passing
saw the
big.
game, he knew how to play, all those things. He was an intensely cerebral player in a way that people didn't even want him to be. They wanted him to be a guy who just went in the post and went to work, and he wanted to push the tempo and be a passer and play a much more sophisticated game than even like Greg Popovich, who was the Warriors coach when he was drafted, even wanted him to play. But not necessarily great on air, because he used to say constantly, this player is saying this by making a shot. I'm like, no, he's not. He's not saying that. He's not saying you can't guard me by making a shot. He's just making a shot.
Steph Curry misses the rebound. You know what Draymond Green says? He says, "That's my rebound, Steph."
So you see, he comes down here and he makes that pull-up jumper, and he says, you can't stop me from making pull-up jumpers. I'm like, I think he's just, I don't think he's saying that. I think he's doing it.
I know. It's just like a weird word. It's like all writing, and because his cadence was fine, his voice was cool, his timing was okay, but his words just weren't good.
He rambled a bit as well, but who's to say there's anything wrong with rambling? I mean, we're talking about a podcast who recorded for 45 days straight.
Perfect.
Rambling's the way. That is the path.
But let's not forget that Chris Webber had one of the most memorable bubble moments, right? Where he had that soliloquy where he went off script and talked about the experience of a player and a black man in this country, and we all got what he was talking about. Like, he communicated that to us in the straightest of lines, right?
I thought he was magnificent in that, and that was the side of Chris Webber that I was speaking of earlier. Smart and sensitive and thoughtful, and wears his heart on his sleeve, which is not necessarily the same toolbox that would make you succeed during a live broadcast.
Right.
So I would like to see more of Chris Webber in places that can, accentuate his more natural skill set and those attributes that are really engaging and warm and magnetic, versus him trying to describe what's happening on the basketball court in a brief, instantaneous way.
Yeah, and like peppering a play-by-play with color, right? Like as a color man, might not be his strength. Maybe he's better as like some guy who sits next to Windhorse on ESPN and breaks down a team. Like I'm down for Weber as an NBA analyst, but maybe calling a game in real time, he doesn't collect the gravity we want from that experience, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes. The last thing, speaking of rambling, the last thing I want to ask you about here, and this is a big one for you.
Oh,
This is where I want to see that
stretch
Chris
it out.
Webber come out of you, that sensitive heart on your sleeve. People are saying that your guy, Julius Randle, is the best Knicks player since Patrick Ewing. Now, this may be over-enthusiasm, hyperbole from Knicks fans. Might be from people who are too young to remember some of the guys from the past. If you are 28 years old, you don't necessarily have a full grasp of the last 20 years of Knicks basketball. But you do.
And
Is Julius Randle the best player on the Knicks since Patrick Ewing?
people call Julius Randle the best player since Patrick Ewing on the Knicks. But Julius Randle says, no, that's only one season. I have to play more than one season to be called the GOAT at
No. I want the heart on the sleeve part, not the broadcasting Chris Webber. I want the emotional, thoughtful C Web. The humility record C Web is the one I want.
The expectations Ewing had pushed upon him, I thought, made his great years that much greater in New York, even though we'll remember him for missing the back rim against, I believe that was the Pacers. See, even I forgot. But that was pre-NBA. It doesn't really count. By the time the NBA started, Patrick Ewing was a grizzled veteran helping Latrell Sprewell into the finals. Mm-hmm. The Ewing theory, right? Which is not true. But let's not take anything away from Julius Randle either, who kind of had a singular season that felt bigger than just a singular season because the Knicks had been relegated for so long, sitting alone in the food court in goth makeup, eating Panda Express.
Well, who are our candidates? Number one would obviously be Melo.
The immediate people that come to mind are Tyson Chandler's Depoy year. He was kind of a wrecking ball that whole season. I think he had a better season than Julius Randle this season. Let's not forget Mitchell Robinson last year, right? Like, he kind of destroyed for stretches. The team wasn't as good around. He didn't have Nerlens Noel being a top 5 defender around him, but Mitchell Robinson has been insanely good. The question I have for you,
I am a big fan of Mitchell Robinson. I'm a big fan of Nerlens. I think the scale of what Randle is doing puts him ahead, say, of Mitch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mitch is not a first or second or third option on offense, right? Like,
I mean, overall, just the amount of minutes he's played. Even when Mitch has been really good, he's never logged the kind of time on the court that Randle has, and therefore just doesn't have. Yeah. No one has that level of impact. And I think that's really the story of Randle's year, is that he's been a total workhorse. I mean, he's leading the NBA in minutes.
Yeah. He's that Tibbs dude, man. He is a wonderful player. I love Carmelo Anthony. I think Carmelo Anthony is criminally underrated as a Knick. And there's chatter that they might retire his number, and they probably should. Melo was not perfect. The best Melo was in Denver, but he had some great seasons in New York. And
2013 Melo led the NBA in scoring. Posted 29 a game.
Yeah,
was third in MVP voting, all NBA. I mean, he really balled out. And
yeah.
We know of Melo's deficiencies.
Yeah.
Mediocre defender, although okay in the post, when engaged.
Yeah.
I good at passing for a bucket.
Yeah.
But not someone who really moved the ball particularly well.
Yeah, and I just want to correct myself. He was not better on Denver. If you believe in advanced metrics through Basketball Reference, he had his best seasons in New York. He was a beast. His BPM was 2.9, 3.6, 4.3, 5.0, 3.0. He was a bona fide super duper star.
Yeah, I can't put Randle on Melo's level.
No.
At all. And again, I think Randle's had a great season. But, we talk about scoring inflation. We talk about efficiency inflation. Those are the real topics for this year. And I think our brains haven't quite caught up with the fact that numbers from today are just not the same as numbers from the past. There are so many guys in the league who can give you around 20 a game on pretty good efficiency. And if they get the kind of opportunity that, especially that Randle has, playing that a number of minutes and getting up that many shots, you're going to put up points. Now, that said, Randle is 19th in the league in points. He's 12th in rebounds, 20th in assists. Those are really impressive to be in the top 20 in those three categories. I think he's had a really good year. But again, he's playing more minutes than anyone, too, at the same time.
His assist percentage career is 17.7. This year, he's assisting, and that's including this year. This year's 27.2. Like,
we've gone through his stats before. Yeah. He's played virtually the same as he did a couple of years ago with the Pelicans, but the passing is a newer sort of wrinkle to his game. And
oh my God.
Credit to Thibs, or however they
sure.
Brought that out of him and allowed him to play as more of a creator than he was given an opportunity to in the past.
Yeah, for sure. He's played 2,667 minutes this year. That's a lot of minutes. His next closest was his second year with 2,286. Like, a lot of minutes, man. But I love him quite a bit, and it's, of course, he plays longer on the court. Of course, he gets a longer leash because of his usage, but he's still great in that role. I love Knicks fans for going out there and doing this kind of stuff, because this is the spice of the game, right? But I would definitely think, Patrick Ewing is the number one to me. He holds like the top tier in my Knicks cold dead heart. And then there's Sprewell and Marcus Camby and Carmelo. Randle is up there. Randle kind of saved us from a certain despair, but we shouldn't the data's everything, and he's. How about
let's not go fucking crazy? Yeah. You're talking about Melo the God.
Melo's
love Randle.
So good.
Love Randle. But, enough. I know. What have you done for me lately? Randle season.
Yeah.
No one even liked the guy last year.
But he was Carmelo, a different player last year, for sure.
He's better.
But he
shot better. But
it took Knicks fans a while this year to get into Randle, though. It took it until maybe All-Star voting time to be like, wait, we might have one, and then he's MVP.
And since they bought in, they're all in. best Knicks since Walt Frazier.
Shout out to Walt Frazier. I mean, I'm more of a Quickly dude, because he's awesome. But I enjoy what Quickly does. That said, Randle's undeniable, as I said a few episodes ago. Max him out. Just pay him whatever he wants. If he walks, thank him. Give him a big hug. But if you're vaccinated, but if he wants to walk, that's cool. If he wants to stay, just pay him everything he wants.
Welcome to Randall's Island.
Mm-hmm. Population 1.
I would also probably put Tyson's Defensive Player of the Year season above Randle this year, and just in terms of overall impact. But it's hard to make that argument because of the responsibilities that Randle has.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyson caught lobs and oversaw the defense. Mm-hmm. Randle does a lot more different things. Mm-hmm. I guess who else would be in this mix? Going back, like Marcus Camby, had a good year or two, but he was kind of in the Tyson Chandler mold.
The Marbury Zebo years were kind of a wash. There wasn't really a great player on there before Melo showed up.
Oh yeah, Marbury's best season in New York was definitely better than Randle too. Sorry.
Are you sure, man? Yeah, I'm gonna clickety clack and find out about this.
Marbury balled out for 1 year in New York.
Yo, I love Stephon Marbury for sure, but
criminally underrated. He balled out.
Oh, he had some very good seasons. He had a great career. So when he was age 27, 2005, statistically he had a better year than Randle. If you believe in these numbers.
But right, you might just be using BPM or whatever. But
I'm using all the advanced stuff. I mean, his per was 21.9. He's a really good player.
But when you looked at his best season, which I think was 05 in New York, and he put up almost 22 a game, 8 assists, 3 rebounds. But this was also during an era where you had point deflation. This was around the area where you had the Spurs and the Pistons going to the finals annually. So to put up 22-8 back then, I think I think those are more impressive than Randle's numbers this year.
But maybe we're thinking too hard about this. Maybe the question is, who is the most popular Knick of all time in a microcosm? Because Ewing was criticized. Sprewell was never given his due, in my opinion. Marbury was criticized. Camby kind of had a low-key vibe to him. Melo was criticized. Randle doesn't get any of that smoke.
So you get some of the smoke?
Does he want any of it? We'll never know because he doesn't get it.
But I don't know. He got criticized a lot last year, but no one was really watching them.
Right. It was because the team was losing. But he was a different player last year. The overwhelming positivity towards this team is alarming. We got mad at politicians for flip-flopping. You know me, I don't care about people changing their mind, but we surely changed our tune.
Well, so quite briefly, that's one of the 4 playoff series that have been determined that will not have the brackets potentially upended by the play-in games. So the Knicks are going to be playing against the Hawks.
Light work.
On ESPN, they had, 15 analysts make their picks, and I think 13 out of 15 picked the Knicks to win that series.
That's not what Vegas had, but Vegas is doing a thing.
I think Vegas has the Knicks favored, I believe.
Oh, I thought the Hawks were favored. No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But it seems to be mostly a pick-em, but the Knicks have home court.
What? I know. It's weird. What a weird season. But
I don't know how I'm not a bettor. I don't know though if I would bet on the Knicks. I think the Hawks are better than them. I don't know if home court is going to really matter.
Yeah.
When you look at the way that the playoffs are going to be held in empty gyms.
But
there may be
refs,
something
right?
tangible.
Yeah.
But there's only 5,000 fans there, 3,000 fans. It could matter. I think the Hawks are a good team, and I think the Knicks have played really well lately, surprisingly well.
All season though.
All season, but even late in the season, when I thought they would.
They made a run.
I thought they would fold, and they doubled down on being good. Yeah. But the Hawks were also extremely good down the stretch.
Yeah, I love the matchup. You have the Rooster playing. Every game is a revenge game for the Rooster. Yeah, Bogdanovich. I was kind of. I can't really put my finger on Bogdanovich. He looked ancient for a second because he was coming back from injury. Now he's the best 3-point shooter in the league. I don't know, but I'm interested in this. I think also it's a pick 'em probably, but the Knicks are gonna pick 'em all the way to championship. So this is just a speed bump on the way to ousting all of these teams.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So the way that the Sixers bracket broke was highly fortuitous. They're going to play the 8th seed at this point. Hard to know. That could be the Celtics or the Pacers. It could be the Hornets. Unclear. Then they play the winner of the Knicks-Hawks series. No disrespect to those teams, but Philly has managed to avoid a potential matchup with Brooklyn, Milwaukee, or Miami, who are probably the three of the 4 best teams.
Why
no
Miami, though?
No disrespect.
Well, you put Miami in there. Did you mean to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. I don't have them there at all. But, yeah, fair enough.
I think those are the 3 toughest matchups outside.
No,
I think the 3 toughest matchups for Philly. So Philly would only have to beat one of them.
The Sixers make quick work of the Heat, right?
I think they're better than the Heat, but the Heat are a tougher team, I think, than some of the other available options. I'd rather play the Knicks or the Hawks than the Heat, personally.
Well, the Knicks versus the Sixers is a automatic cookies win because either the Knicks win, which they will, or if the Sixers manage to win, it's a Knicks ex great as head coach. So it's
and if the Sixers lose, then they've lost to Nerlens Noel, the process hero that got away.
Norvel Pell.
Alec Burks.
Was Alfred Payton ever a Sixer? No, wishful thinking.
Briefly.
Oh, really?
On draft day, then immediately dealt for the rights to Dario Saric. Technically drafted by Sam Hinkie.
Yeah. The East, yeah, this shouts to the Sixers because that's what you get for being a number one seed. There should be a better reward for, well, teams should be rewarded more for finishing higher in the regular season. And I know this is just way it kind of worked out randomly, but the top seed deserves this path, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at last year in the bracket, the Lakers had the best record in basketball, and then ended up having to play like Portland in the first round. You're like that, who was like a very hot team at that time. Yeah. But yeah, I think the Sixers' path is. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? I think the Sixers' path is as good as it can possibly get.
Yeah.
And if they end up playing Brooklyn, they end up playing Milwaukee, I think that'll be a great series. And those are tough enough opponents that if Philly wins that and goes to the finals, no one will say that they like got an easy path.
Right.
Even though it is advantageous in the first two rounds. They're going to have to beat somebody good at some point. That's as you always have to.
Yo, the Sixers are full strength, and this is exactly what we wanted, right? Like, my fear the whole season was like, can you get these two superstars into the playoffs healthy? And they're healthy. Let's go. Like, this is it, right?
This is it. I think, I think this is, Philly has a great opportunity. We'll talk more about this next week. But my concern with Philly is that their offense does not look like a championship offense,
no.
Even though the personnel looks like it should have a championship offense. That is my concern.
Save your Doc Rivers takes, man.
I'll save it. My
Pull
Dave
the dogs,
Yeager
yeah.
heat. That's Dave Yeager. I want all the smoke, or at least some of the smoke.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see it? Let's do the big Sixers thing next time because we need to lead off our basketball segment with it. But do you see anything in the West that is interesting to you other than avoid celestial seasonings if you want to stay awake during this pod?
No. Let's talk about Clips Dallas next time.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
You know what? This pod's perfect.
Yeah, we don't want to
It's
ruin
just-
a perfect pod.
Yeah, especially getting into like Dallas talk.
Yeah, know when to pull your starters, Ben.
Exactly. Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.